Are we a religion, a nation, a people, a family, a culture, a race, an ethnicity? And people usually shake their head and they go, we're all of them. And I said, we're all of them except one, we're not.
What is home? Yes, we have our homeland Israel, and yes, we have homes throughout the diaspora. But our current reality is complex. Israel's at war, and anti-Semitism is rising around the world. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean for this question of home? Join me, Izzy, as I speak with Israeli and diaspora Jewry to better understand this new complex reality and unpack where we put ourselves in this physical and spiritual war. This is the My Israel Narrative podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of the My Israel Narrative podcast. We're sitting here today with Rabbi Ken Spiro. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
The busy times. Rabbi Spiro is just has a plethora of knowledge historically. I think even just personally, from what I understand, what you've been through, that you really share with the world in many different contexts related to Judaism, related to Israel. One of my favorite books is Crash Course in Jewish History. I recommend it to every person to read. Even if you're a complete beginner, you know nothing about Judaism, it is an absolute must. That was like my COVID read. So yeah, I speak about it all the time. And I just really feel lucky to just be able to sit here and kind of pick your brain a little from both the personal side and also professional side. A little bit about just Israel, where we're at now, the times we're in. So you just want to give a brief intro, maybe just where you are, how you got here specifically.
Sure. Well, I always jokingly say if someone told me, observant Jew, rabbi, Israel, none of these things were in my future plans. I was raised Reform, non-observant really. New Rochelle, New York, went to public school, New Rochelle High School, went to Vassar College undergrad. I wanted to do international business, so I studied in college Russian language and literature and Japanese, thinking those would be good languages. Today it would be Spanish and Mandarin. When I got out of college, I'd already studied 7 years Russian. I could read War and Peace in the original Russian, but I couldn't ask for directions on the street. So I said, before going to grad school in business, I'm going to take a year off, and I'm going to go half a year to the University of Moscow as a graduate student. And then, because I had another half a year to kill, I'd never been to Israel. My parents were not like Zionists. Of course, they loved Israel, but they went once in their life. In the 60s, they never took us there. So I said, I'll go to kibbutz. Good way to spend half a year before going to grad school, pick grapefruits with Danish volunteers. So when I went off to Russia, it was the Soviet Union. When it was the Soviet Union, it was illegal for a Jew to even learn Hebrew or study or practice Judaism. And I ended up cutting almost all my classes that I didn't really care about anyway. I just wanted the immersion in the language and hanging out with hundreds of young Russian Jews who were secretly trying to learn Hebrew and study Judaism with no books, because you get arrested for having a book, secretly keeping Shabbat, and all of them were trying to get out and go to Israel. And I remember just the feeling of, I'm going to Israel, and they were like, whoa, some of them have been waiting 10 years to do it. But I was so blown away by their commitment. I thought, Judaism was kind of meaningless and irrelevant, and then I see these people literally risking their lives to be connected spiritually and to their people, and I said, there's got to be something more here than I've been exposed to. So instead of going to kibbutz, a friend of mine had been in this yeshiva, which is, a school for studying Judaism. It was specifically geared towards people who had no background, and he had been there before and he wanted to go back again. So we decided to go together after I got back from Russia. And it was going to be 3 months. I stayed a little longer. I always jokingly say now I am at 10 months and 41 years.
Nice.
So I studied full-time in yeshiva. I got smicha, so I'm a rabbi without a congregation. And I got a master's degree in history. I'm a licensed tour guide, historian, author, speaker, father of 5 grown children now, all born and raised in Israel with kids of their own. Wow. So it's been a long, strange trip, as Jerry Garcia would say.
That's the dream. You started to build your own little empire here in the place you came to with your own dreams.
Well, I have 2 of my 3 siblings followed. Wow. And my parents made Aliyah 10 years ago. Wow. So it's all, we all plan beautiful. And we end up in different places than we ever thought of.
It's really beautiful. But you were the first. When you came, you came alone.
I was the pioneer, yeah.
Beautiful. And you said So you mentioned your parents were Zionists, but they had never been to Israel.
They weren't Zionists per se. They weren't involved in any way, in any formal way. They were very into Israel. I mean, they didn't do any activism for it, but of course, being Jewish of that generation, you know, post-Holocaust, they were very supportive, but they only went once in their life. My father was in the Air Force. We lived in Casablanca, Morocco, when I was little. My father was a captain in the Air Force, was a doctor. And they took one of these free Air Force flights and went to Israel in 1961. So that was, they didn't come back again until 1982 when I was there to visit me. It's 21 years later. So they weren't really Zionists per se. We were not a member of any Zionist youth movements. Just Israel was a thing, you know, we knew about it.
What did Zionism look like then? Like what you said, like in the 70s and early 80s, like...
Well, it's hard to say because having not been involved in it per se in any kind of movement like the youth movements, like the B'nai Akiva movement or anything like that. But it was kind of just a background program that was running. Support for Israel was so across the board. You don't have like you have the situation today. Israel was the little David surrounded by the Goliath. I don't really remember so much the 6-Day War, although I was around then. I remember the 73 War. I remember my mother was crying like the whole day because people were freaking out that Israel was going to be destroyed. So it was just kind of a thing that you supported Israel, even if you didn't speak Hebrew, had never actually visited there, and most Jews in America, certainly back then, had not been to Israel. So it was just kind of post-Holocaust, the necessity of having a Jewish state was just way too real for people to think otherwise.
So, and it sounds like when you first came, the piece that you latched onto initially, I mean, you were going to go work the land and be in a kibbutz, and then you kind of had this pivot and connected to your Judaism and whatnot, I guess, in a way through the land as well. How did that journey, now you're a historian and other things, how did that journey like evolve? How did you start to connect to all these different elements being here?
So I wasn't coming because I wanted to work the land out of the spirit of rebuilding the land. It was very unidealistic. It was just...
I was trying to make you look good.
Sorry?
I said I was trying to make you look good. But
I know, I'm just being honest. I figured it's something that would be, I really want to visit Israel. And the way to go there for a long period of time without being in a school, which I didn't want to do, and I wasn't interested in going to yeshiva because it just wasn't on my radar. I'll go to kibbutz. That's what people do in Israel. Give me real experience. I did want to get the experience of what it was really like to be in Israel, a little immersion, as opposed to doing touristy things, which I like to do also. But I like living in a place for a long period of time and getting to know the people. So it just ended up coming for what I thought would be 3 months. And after I studied for, I said there's a lot more here than I've been exposed to. I'm a real novice in my Judaism, and I also got very lit up by. Eshet Torah was very about changing the world, that Jewish mission of the Tikkun Olam thing on a different level than we appreciate it today. It's not just social justice stuff. It's just about really the Jews are the light to the nations. That really kind of lit me up. I was always very idealistic, so I basically came to a point after a few months, A, I need to learn more because I'm like at a preschool level of my Jewish knowledge, and B, if it's true that this is all true, we're this unique nation with this unique history and an incredible mission, and we are the people who brought the idea of God to the world and objective moral standard. And why would I want to go to business school? This is something that seems to be a lot more meaningful. I wasn't really that materialistically into just making a lot of money, and this kind of sort of lit a spark in me that the start of the fire that's still burning. I'm still there. I've never moved out of that. So
amazing. So yeah, I wanted to ask you how you keep the fire going, because that's something that's not so easy. Especially when you come to a place you find, obviously you found a home here, but it was foreign and it was new. And in fact, over all these years, you've been able, what's the secret in keeping it alive?
It's because of what I got involved in doing. I not only studied, but then I went into education. I was originally very involved with the Soviet Union when it collapsed in the 1990s, because I was a Russian speaker. We opened up branches there, but it's because I'm daily involved I'm also a licensed tour guide, and I split my time between a lot of different things I've developed over the years, doing different things, and also my Jewish outlook, my outlook on Israel, my outlook on Judaism. It's always a process I'm pretty settled where I am now finally, but people go through phases. So, but I've always been involved either in teaching about Judaism or Israel, guiding Judaism or Israel. So it's what I do. I don't do it for, I make a living out of it, but I'm very passionate. I always tell people the luckiest thing a person can do in this world is to do something they love and make a living out of it.
Sure.
The worst thing you could do is do something you hate and get paid badly for it. So I figure, I could certainly, I'm not making big money here. And education is not a money-making field. But the fact that I was able to make a living out of it, live comfortably, and do what I love doing, and I'm still involved in it. It has no expiration date. It's the whole being in the middle of Jewish history and being in the middle of Jewish history in Israel is always an exciting experience in many different levels. So
definitely. You said that, if I was understanding correctly, kind of coming to a place, an even ground with where Israel and Judaism meet. Is that what you're referring to in that statement?
Yeah, because I came into when I came to Israel, it was basically through the religious, more or less the Haredi is the term, the ultra-Orthodox. Most of the outreach work done in the Jewish world is done by the black-hatted crowd, mostly Ashkenazi, European Jews, but also the Sephardic world. So that's kind of the worldview that was fed to me, having not grown up with it. It wasn't Zionist at all. I wasn't anti, but I wasn't into the state of Israel. My own personal, I ended up doing the army actually, which was the best ulpan I ever did to learn Hebrew, and I did it late. I came to Israel at 22, but I was a student and a tourist for a number of years, and then I was a temporary resident. And by the time I did the army, I was 30 years old. So I didn't do the full thing. But based on where I ended up living in Givat Ze'ev and expanding a lot of people come to Israel and they end up in a little community. You can end up in places in Israel like Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is, I call it the Passaic of Israel. For those who are familiar with Jewish communities on the East Coast of the United States, it's very Anglo. It's, fairly, most parts of it are not, but fairly well affluent place. And it's almost like you're not living in Israel.
Right.
So you can live in your own little self-ghettoized Anglo community. But I sort of made a point of wanting to live more in Israel, not in those. So I lived in Givat Ze'ev for 30 years. We lived in Givat Ze'ev. We had a house there. My kids were all raised there, which was mostly Israeli, mixed, religious, secular, very different from a lot of the neighborhoods in Jerusalem, which is everyone looks the same and kind of thinks the same. And so my journey to where I ended up in my Jewish identity and where I would identify myself as in which community, and also my journey into my connection to Israel was an evolving process. It was not what I originally experienced, but it's what I grew into as I lived and experienced things here and started kind of objectively looking at, understanding the history. I'm a historian primarily, so that gave me a lot of background to understand why this group of people is saying this about Israel and why that group of people is saying that about Israel, and both Jews and non-Jews. So it kind of brought me to where I am through my own exploration.
So it sounds like you really made it your own. You made it your Israel story. I think that's what I mentioned in the beginning. I saw you have like a whole presentation and talk on just that alone, making Israel your own. And right now, something that I've been speaking with a lot of people about is that because of the situation we're in with war here, anti-Semitism outside, so what I find is that the Israel story that's being pushed on a lot of people subconsciously is one that's not necessarily positive in a way. It is positive because we want to stand strong, we want to support, but there's a little bit of this undercurrent of, well, I don't know, so maybe we do similar in a way to like the post-Holocaust generation. Maybe we need Israel as a place to run, or we need Israel so we can show the world we're strong. So part of what I'm trying to bring out and do is help people connect to that authentic Israel story from all angles. So I guess if you want to speak to it, I don't know, from a historical place a little bit, but even just trying to speak to a broad community, not just the religious, because the religious community now is also speaking a lot about Mashiach, and like this is the time of Mashiach, and so everything will. But if you've never heard that rhetoric before, that's so foreign, that's so hard to latch onto. So where do we go with this, like to create a new space? Like that's kind of what I'm contending with and trying to. Right,
I understand 100%. First of all, when I'm talking about Israel, when I'm guiding especially, the first thing I ask, and I get people I guide who are completely, I have non-Jews I guide, I have intermarried couples, I have people who are completely secular and non-Zionist, to people who are very Zionistic, and people who are ultra-Orthodox and aren't even into the state of Israel. So I've run the gamut. But when I have an audience of people, a group of people, even very religious Jews, I always like to ask them, what is being Jewish? Because that's the beginning question. And I throw it out as, are we a religion, a nation, a people, a family, a culture, a race, an ethnicity? And people usually shake their head and they go, we're all of them. And I said, we're all of them except one. We're not a race. We come in all size, shapes, and colors, and anyone can join the Jewish people. So you can't join a race. But we're not just a nation like being an American or Canadian. We're not just a religion like being a Catholic or a Hindu. We're kind of a national religion. We have a national component and we have a religious component to who we are. Which means even if you live outside the land of Israel and you're not Israeli, you're still Jewish. And even if you live in Israel and you're not religious, you're still Jewish. So you can't escape that. You know, you're always a Jew no matter where you are. But first of all, I think it's two things. One is it's very important to be balanced, but for those Jews living in the diaspora outside of Israel, there's a huge difference between Jews who are connected Jewishly. There are secular Zionists, and that's a movement that is largely dissipated. It lived about 100 years. It came largely out of the late 19th century when even Germany and Italy finally coalesced into nation states and nationalism was a movement, and the Jews are looking around thinking, well, everyone else is getting a country. We need ours back. Okay, we had one already, want it back. And because of anti-Semitism, all early Zionist writers are saying basically that the reason we're hated is we have no port of refuge, no passport, no army. You know, there's no for us. We're stateless people. We're wandering Jews. When we have those things, anti-Semitism will cease. You know, sadly, you know, I say Herzl died in 1904. Fast forward to 2023, and the number one excuse for hating Jews is the state of Israel. So you do have that. That's not the cause, by the way, at all.
Right.
But you do have that group of people who, for a very short, like, spark, like almost a flicker in Jewish history, were secular people connected to the land of Israel. And there's still such people around, but it's largely not what's going on. But the traditional connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is a spiritual religious connection also. It's a national connection, but you cannot disconnect the national one from the spiritual one. And then I explained to people that we are a very unique nation. And I always use the analogy that I use, because I travel all over the world speaking. I was just in South Africa about 6 weeks ago. And I've learned South Africa has the weirdest wall plug in the world. You know, when you travel, you need the right adapter.
Yeah.
You need the right voltage, the right adapter. If not, your appliance isn't going to work. I always tell people we're a very special appliance that only plugs into one outlet that enables us to work at peak efficiency, which is the land of Israel. When I say work at peak efficiency, it's all predicated on understanding of what our job is, which is, you know, in the secular Zionist vision, and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Zionist. I mean, I did the army, I have a double barbecue on Independence Day. I have 3 of my 5 kids were combat medics. You know, I had a daughter in the Navy, I had a daughter who was a combat medic. They had twin girls, they were at the same time. But this notion, this secular Zionist idea, which is just it accomplished basically putting the physical infrastructure into the land of Israel. It built the roads, it built the farms, it put the electric grid, it did the army, it did incredible stuff. But the connection to the land of Israel goes all the way back to who we are as a nation, which goes all the way back to Abraham, where we're given a unique, God tells us right at the beginning of Genesis to leave, separate yourself, go to this unique piece of real estate. And it's there that you will, of course, prosper on every level, but it's there that you will accomplish your mission, which is to be a role model for the world. And the only place that we can ultimately be the nation we're supposed to be with this very specific mission and accomplish it is in the land of Israel. You know, the secular Zionist ideal of liot am chofshi be'artzenu, which is the only word of Hatikva I don't like, is the be a free nation in our land. I think we should be free in our land for sure. But what they had in mind was, we want to be like everyone else. We just want to be free to be like, create a Europe on the other side of the Mediterranean. Yeah. Tel Aviv was designed as a modern European style city with boulevards and cafes where people would sit and drink coffee and talk about literature and go to the beach. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I'm not knocking any of that. I think Tel Aviv is a great city. But we're never going to be allowed to be like anyone else. I mean, if you can't see what's going on in the world today, the crazy double standard, the fact that the UN has condemned Israel more than every other country in the world combined. So I'm doing a kind of circular answer around a point, which is the bottom line is we understand who we are, which is a unique nation that has a spiritual component to our identity and a mission that comes with that. Which, even if you don't keep the mission, you're disconnected from the nation, you're still Jewish. It's not a matter of your, the citizenship thing or not. On a spiritual level, you're part of the Jewish people no matter what. But we understand that the land of Israel was a piece of real estate given to us by the big guy upstairs that enables us to individually and collectively plug in and achieve our potential in a way that cannot be accomplished anywhere else on the planet Earth. It doesn't mean Jews can't accomplish. We accomplish everywhere. Wherever you place us, we're the pollinators of everything, culture and science and creativity. That's a Jewish thing. Can't keep Jews down. But to get to ultimately, there's our real mission, which is not to win as 0.2% of the world's population, 22% of the Nobel Prizes since 1901, which is a kind of crazy over-accomplishment. But our real mission is to be humanity's role model, to create the nation that's a light to nations, to show people how to run a country on every level better than anywhere else can. That the only place that can be done is in Israel, and that's the only mission that we ultimately have to accomplish for the world to stop picking on us and actually back us up. And I know it sounds kind of weird. If you're not thinking in those terms, it's kind of messianic.
Right.
It definitely is. But it's easily demonstrable. It is easily, everything I'm saying is easily demonstrable. The unique nature of the Jewish people, the unique nature of the modern state of Israel, the unique nature of Jewish history, the unique way, mostly negative, that the world looks at us and goes nuts on us as if we're the greatest threat to the human race. And there's so many, the problem with being Jewish is everything about our history is so supernatural, whether it's the highs or the lows. If weird and supernatural happen to you all the time, yeah, sure, I can assume that everyone in the world's going to hate my guts.
Yeah.
Sure, every country's going to pick on me. We just assume this is just being Jewish, but it's not. It's not normal. So it really requires, I would say, that to the extent that a person has the big picture, understands that Judaism is much more a religion. It's that we're a nation with a mission. The observance is a means to an ends. To the extent that we and a lot of religious Jews don't get this, that we have that big picture in mind, to that extent is the extent that they'll realize the significance, the centrality of what Israel is about, and the necessity of ultimately being in Israel, and the extent that a person recognizes how history works, and this we have a few hours, I'll clearly demonstrate it to you. There's only two kinds of Jews. Jews who live in Israel and those who will be living in Israel. That's the way it works.
So the end goal is everyone ends up here.
Not that everyone ends up here, but they won't. There's a famous midrash, rabbinic literature about the Exodus narrative that 80% of the Jews never left Egypt.
Right.
For every person Jewish, there's hundreds and hundreds of non-Jews who should be Jewish who are not, who've opted out of being Jewish, who have Jewish blood. So that everyone ends up back here? No, but there's only, as a Jew, identifying as a Jew, look, you can clearly see, and as weird as that sounds, you can clearly demonstrate that God is shutting down the exile. 75 years ago, there were 800,000 Jews living in the Arab Middle East who were ethnically cleansed within a period of less than 20 years. Today, there are less than 15,000 Jews living in the entire Arab Middle East, including everything.
Right.
Iran actually has the largest Jewish population.
Yeah, it's actually quite large.
Of Islamic State because they're stuck there.
Yeah.
But compared to what used to be, they're gone. In 1990, the Soviet Union ended and over 1 million Jews. That part shut down. Europe is becoming very uncomfortable for Jews. Every French Jew that I know has a place in Netanya. And what was happening in Europe 15 years ago is now happening in America. That the only police car I ever saw in a synagogue when I was growing up Reform was the one on Rosh Hashanah to direct the cars from the parking lot because there was so many of them there.
Right. You
never had, even 20 years ago, security outside a synagogue in America.
It's new. It's the past couple months. I've never experienced it in my time.
But it's like the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. They put the frog in the water when it's cool and they turn the heat on and it gets slowly hot. And by the time the frog realizes how hot it is, he's boiled to death. It's a little bit scary analogy, but what would have been impossible 10 years ago is now totally the norm today. So you clearly see, if you look, the population, Israel in 1900 had 0.5% of the world's Jewish population living in it. Today, at least half the Jews in the world are living in Israel. Mm-hmm. The world's population has gone up 340% since the end of World War II. The population of Israel has gone up over 1,100%, 3 times that. Oh. Unbelievable. But I said in 1900, one kid spoke Hebrew as his first language, Eliezer ben Yehuda's son, Ben Sion, who had a terrible childhood because he had no one to play with. Like no play dates. Oh. Today, Hebrew is the first language of half the Jews in the world. That hasn't been so since the First Temple period. I mean, these are things that, like, we just say them. You know, I always say, if you could bring Herzl and Eliezer Ben Yehuda back for a day and have them wander through Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, their eyes would be popping out of their heads. Tel Aviv was a sand dune in 1909, which was 5 years after Herzl died. It was established. So we don't appreciate it. It's all supernatural, although because it happens through natural means, not the earth opening up and things popping out and dropping from heaven. But it's nonetheless, if you can look at it and stand back, you see that it's everything. The wheels are turning, and they're turning very, very fast.
It is all miraculous in more ways than one. But I guess the question that also keeps coming back to me is, like, I just spent 2 months back in America since everything began here. And it's very clear. I mean, the writing's on the wall. It's not, you can be blind to it. You can close your eyes and say, it's not happening, it's happening. But my question is the call of the hour right now, that's it, close up shop. Everybody, it's time to make moves. We're all coming to Israel. Or is there something else in the interim we're supposed to be, does history say or point to something else we're doing? Because also the one thing that I'm curious from your perspective, I found is a little bit different today versus other times when we've kind of had this history repeating itself moment of anti-Semitism and being pushed out, is that we have a voice. We have a strong voice. And people are not being shut. Even with all the anti-Semitism, they're going and they're putting their menorahs up. And they're going, they're putting, really, like I saw, and I was driving around New York City. I was there, I only got here 2 days ago, so I was there the first days of Hanukkah. And every menorah I saw, like in public places, I was like, wow, that's like actually a miracle, like this time around. I never felt that. So that's really a miracle. But people aren't afraid. And and people are going and buying more Magen Davids and more things. I don't think we had a time, I could be wrong, where like there was really this fervent desire to say, you want to get us out? Okay, we don't, but we're not backing down this time. We're not just letting you push us into a corner. So how does that come into the picture of like this whole, things go bad, we go? I don't know, something isn't adding up for me in that
That's
space.
a good question. I mean, and a big, you know, they said big adol. The big picture is all of human history, as we understand as Jews, is an interplay between our free will and God's infinite control and knowledge. We always get to the finish line in the story. The question is how quickly, how slowly, how painfully, how painlessly. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's this way or no way at all. One way or another, we'll get there. The question is, how much is it going to take to get us out? Do we leave willingly? Do we leave on an emergency evacuation flight? Look, I don't believe it. Like tomorrow. It's creeping up on us. The frog in the water analogy again. As it happens, it's a slow process. Things are changing. The issue is, you know, you see, we not only are people standing up, but we have friends. We actually have friends. Unfortunately, the confused side and the side of evil is always better organized than the side of good and truth. So they make a lot of noise and they scream, but it's not like you look in America. There's a lot of people, the majority, especially the older people, the intersectional, you know, woke stuff that's going on kind of puts, you know, all people of color and Arabs and Palestinians and Black Lives Matter. It's all got to be it's always the victims and the victor. And now, and Israel's been recast as the dominant superpower, which it isn't. But so, but there's people who are on our side, and it's amazing how much the issue of Israel is becoming the defining issue about reality today. Right. You can literally, George Gilder wrote a book called The Israel Test, which is required reading. He's not even Jewish, and he said that. He basically, I'm paraphrasing him, show me what a country thinks of Israel, and I'll tell you about their human rights and their values.
Wow.
And by the way, show me an individual, just as Jews were the canary in the coal mine. That's the analogy Dennis Prager uses. You know, when evil comes into the world, it will target Jews first, and then it spreads to everyone else. So there's bigger things going on in the world in general. I hold the real battle is over truth and reality and truth are the same thing. So and Israel is kind of a litmus test for that, because this is the most unambiguous fight that Israel's fighting in Gaza now, between clearly unadulterated, pure evil and an army that's behaving with more morality than any army in human history, yet the world is equivocating and the U.S. is screaming and calling. So, but what does it mean for Jews individually? You know, I always say like this to people, because I'm a big advocate that people should obviously be living in Israel, but I'm a realist too. It's not realistic for everyone to just drop what they're doing for various reasons, whether it's I got teenagers in school, or whether it's I've got my work is there and I have no way of making parnassa. I'm saying begin the process. Like I always tell people, now that I'm saying this, I'm shooting myself in the foot, because, you know, if I want to buy an apartment in Israel, it's almost impossible in Jerusalem, because everything here is owned by people who don't live here and have more money than I do. But I tell people at least get your foot in the door. And I should have made a deal with a real estate agent years ago because I could be making a lot of money on commissions. So
that really is a shame.
I have got so many people to buy houses here. Just saying, look, you're not ready to live here now? Get a place. Okay? COVID, when Israel closed for over a year, a lot of people got... Making Aliyah has implications financially for people and a lot of different things. But you can get in. They can't turn you away if you're a citizen. I know a lot of people who...
That's why I made Aliyah.
Because I don't want to be in a state like COVID. Yeah. What's happened, 9/11, COVID, it's giving the experience of experiencing things that we never experienced before and realize that this could happen. You know, planes crashing into buildings was science fiction or some drama, you know, like Die Hard movie, you know, like doesn't really happen in real life. And then, well, my God, it's happening. And the world shutting down, oh my God, it's happening. Right. A war where pretty much the world is dividing between we are either going to openly attack Israel or we're going to stand behind and support the people attacking Israel and those who are going to stand at our side. All these things are happening before our eyes. So it's a big wake-up call. Like you said, a lot of people post-Holocaust, we're not going to go like sheep to the slaughter. We're not going to be intimidated. And again, America's not Nazi Germany. The difference between the two is the anti-Semitism is coming from the intersectional crazy, you know, the radical Islamists in America and a lot of the woke university students who mean well but have less than zero knowledge of anything but just feel this is the thing I got to yell and scream about now. But at least the core of the U.S. government and as a liberal democratic country is not the same environment. But we should never think that that can't change also. I'm not saying it will, but if you told a Jew in 1930, and no one loved their host country more than German Jews love Germany, even more than Americans love America. They were so gaga on that culture. If you told a Jew in 1930 that, you know, by 10 years from now, there's going to be no Jews left in Germany and most of Europe because of what this country that you love so much is going to do, not just to you, but to all the Jews in Europe, they would have said, you're out of your mind. This is the most technologically, culturally advanced country on the planet. This is the modern world. This is civilization. We don't have pogroms anymore. So I'm not a fearmonger person, but clearly, if you stand back and objectively look and have the vision and the this perspective, you see things are moving, and it's like it's the same thing I say to people about Judaism. You know, it's not like you're all religious or secular. There's a ladder you're on. Same thing with living in Israel. It's a ladder you're on. Just be moving in the right direction. Don't think. And I understand a lot better why people who aren't religious Jews stay in America. What I don't understand is how all these religious Jews stay there. That to me is mind-blowing. I understand why they do. It's not like I don't understand.
Yeah, I know.
They're comfortable. But diaspora, we have to understand, and this is a really interesting historical point, diaspora is a punishment. We were thrown into diaspora. If you understand Jewish history, the problem is it's a comfortable prison now. It is a form of a prison. We're free to move around, but it's a punishment. Trust me, as many periods of time in Jewish history where living amongst Gentiles was horrible. But now it's as good as it gets. Like I always say when I speak in Boca Grove in Boca Raton, Florida, which is, I always say, I was there speaking, and it's like the nicest Jewish community you could possibly live in outside the land of Israel. And I said, I tell this to the whole crowd. I said, I'm renaming this place as good as Gullus gets. Because this is as good as it gets.
There's a lot of those.
The problem with being that good is there's only one place to go, which is down, and you know it's coming slowly. If I knew when it was all going to happen, I'd be a prophet. If I was a prophet, I'd be working in Wall Street. I would not be a tour guide. But
I think you'd still be a tour guide.
Yeah, probably would be. But I wouldn't want to work in Wall Street, God forbid. But it's just really important not to go back to sleep, and to have to at least. You should wake up every morning if you're living in, like I always say something about the Gold Dome. Every day that there's not a temple in Jerusalem, God's upset too. I mean, thank God it's a monotheistic site with nothing inside it. So it's kind of guarding the holiness of the place. They could have put a lot worse things on the Temple Mount. Right. You know? But that shouldn't be there either. God said, I gave you Jerusalem in 1967. It's 56 years. Why haven't you rebuilt that building? I don't need a house, but if the land of Israel is the outlet, then the power supply is Jerusalem. Why isn't it working properly? You know, so he's telling us, I gave you a country in 1948. In 48, it was very tough to come live in Israel. It was a third world country at a state of war, having to absorb millions of immigrants. It was like rationing everything. Okay, it might not be quite as nice as some places outside of Israel, but trust me, after 41 years, Israel is a pretty comfortable place to live in. And it's also safer. I feel much safer here than in America. Totally. Much safer here. Here I know I'm responsible for my safety and the threats. I know where they are and I can deal with them. with God's help. But in America, it's as much as America's an amazing country, it's not your country. Okay, I'm a citizen, but it's not. This is our home, and this is the place where it's hard. When I explain it to people, they don't get it. Is Israel so dangerous? I said, no, it isn't. It's not. It really isn't.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
That's right now. It's a very challenging. Like when I told people I was coming out, be safe. Be safe. I said, you be safe. And when we daven, obviously we're diving for Am Yisrael, for sure, diving for Chayalim who are literally on the front lines. It's very important. But I almost jokingly, but I'm not joking. I say to friends, we should be doing the tefillah the other way too. Israel should be praying for the diaspora. Like we're all whatever. But here, yes, where it's coming from. I think also that just quickly reflect one thing you were saying about German Jews were so in love with Germany, and American Jews right now are so in love with America, even with all that's going on. Yeah. And one point that I keep trying to explain is like we are not trying to make the American government on our side so we can like win them over and be safe and we're the only reason we're doing this, the only reason for this battle is like to just bring truth and light. Yeah. It's not about getting them to be on our side and protect us and give us the security we need. That's all coming from sources well beyond what they can provide.
That's flipping it over, exactly. Iran says it the best. Israel's the little Satan and America's the big Satan. I always say Israel is the source and America is the symbol of the values that make the relationship so tight, because it says right on the U.S. money, in God we trust. The success of America, and I could quote you president after president saying this, comes from the Bible-based roots that come from God and the morality and the vision that comes from Judaism. So it's done great things for the United States.
Right.
And it's done great things. And Jews have benefited tremendously from America. If you got to live, but America is, in my opinion as a historian, the final station stop of diaspora before it all shuts down. Because when America shuts down, okay, Canada, whatever, but when America shuts down, there's nowhere else. No one's going back to France or back to Russia, or they're going to, let's move to Asia now and try that one out. No. This is the last stop. God said, okay, it took you 2,000 years since the destruction of the Second Temple, but time's running out, game over, come back and do it now when you don't have to be like when we had to do these Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, where you literally airlifted all of these Jews from Yemen and different places. In Ethiopia, emergency, they come with whatever they can schlep on their back. It's not the way you want to come. You don't want to be living by the Egyptian border with a tent with a spigot of water like the camps that existed in Israel in the 50s. Now you can do it comfortably on an El Al flight, bring a lift, nefesh b'nefesh, But it starts by the person has to start appreciating what Israel's about. And who we are about. And the extent that the person has a strong Jewish identity is the extent that they will realize the centrality of Israel to that and come to love the country for every reason, not just to be like anyone else with the country, but there's something very special. There's a very special energy and an opportunity and something that we can do as a nation that the world needs, that we can only do in this place and not anywhere else.
Beautiful. I think just to sum it up, we just said it really, really beautiful there. It's like we need that Jewish foundation. Through that, create the connection and the love to Israel and the understanding of what Israel is as part of that relationship. And once you have that foundation, so you can start planting the seeds with the eye on the prize, I guess, in a way, of your perspective, what you're holding from a religious, historical perspective, that ultimately this is where we'll be kind of led back. So thank you, really, for your time and for your insights. And
my pleasure.
It's a pleasure for me. So that. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Israel Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along and subscribe. Until next time, Am Yisrael Chai.